Picture this: I inherit 47 acres of prime Montana land from my grandfather, complete with mineral rights, timber rights, and a century-old private gravel road that connected directly to the county highway, and the smell of pine sap still clung to the survey stakes. When I first walked that soil, after Grandpa Henry passed and left it to me, and I thought maybe I could build a modest cabin there and start my own electrical contracting business, something small, something real, because Grandpa always said, "Jake, this dirt is worth more than gold, but only if you are smart enough to hold on to it." And I planned to do just that. But 3 months after the funeral, when I drove from Billings up to Whitefish to finally see the land as its new owner, I discovered something that nearly made my lungs stop working right there on that mountain road. Because standing where my forest should have been was not wilderness, but a sprawling subdivision, a place called Whitefish Meadows, 36 luxury homes, each worth about $400,000, streetlights, sidewalks, and even a fancy stone entrance with bronze lettering, all sitting squarely on my property. And the real kicker was that every resident was driving over my gravel road, the one my grandfather had maintained for decades, as if it belonged to them, their SUVs grinding the gravel into dust like fingernails on a chalkboard. And I thought maybe it was a mistake, until I knocked on the door of the biggest house, a massive colonial that looked like it belonged in Georgia, and was greeted by Brenda Kowalski, the self-proclaimed queen of this HOA empire. She was the kind of woman who measured lawns with a ruler, wore pearls to the grocery store, and drove a white Escalade with license plates that read Hoperas. And when I introduced myself, politely explained who I was, showed her my deed, and told her the truth, she laughed in my face, a high-pitched hyena laugh, and said, "Oh, honey, I bought this land fair and square at a county tax sale 3 years ago. Your grandfather obviously did not pay his taxes, and when I produced the manila folder full of every receipt and canceled check proving the taxes were current, she smirked, looked me up and down like I had crawled out from under a rock, and said, 'Listen, hun, maybe you should get a real lawyer instead of whatever public defender you found on Craigslist.' And then added, 'Besides, even if you prove this is your land, which you won't, we have squatters' rights, look it up, cowboy.' And with that, she slammed the door so hard her wreath fell to the porch, and I stood there in shock until the gears in my head started turning, because every single one of those homes depended entirely on my private road. There was no other way in or out of Brenda's little kingdom. And 2 days later, I hired Cassandra Webb, a property attorney whose office smelled like leather-bound books and strong coffee. And within 48 hours, she confirmed exactly what I suspected: the land was legally mine, the taxes were all paid, and the so-called county tax sale was pure fiction forged by a corrupt clerk at Brenda's request, making this not only trespassing, but outright fraud. So armed with that truth, I confronted Brenda again. But she ripped Cassandra's certified letter in half, called me a squatter, and doubled down by spreading notices to all residents warning them that I was a dangerous man harassing their community, and to call police if they saw me. She even installed a giant iron gate with spikes at the county road, cutting off my own access, which ironically proved the road was private, not public, and gave us the smoking gun, because you cannot gate public property, only private. So we documented everything: photos of the gate, the contractors, the cement footings, and every unlawful detail. But while doing that, I met Sarah Smith, a young mother pushing her stroller, who quietly asked if I was the man Brenda warned them about. And when I explained the truth, her face went pale. She had spent her life savings on a house that legally sat on my land, and she whispered that Brenda had also been collecting extra $200 monthly assessments, supposedly for legal defense funds, essentially pocketing thousands on top of the $400 HOA dues. And that revelation stayed with me, because I realized these families were victims too, not just me, and the fraud ran deeper than even I thought. And soon Brenda escalated by hiring armed security guards, ex-military types in tactical gear, to patrol the gate 24/7. But even they eventually quit when she failed to pay them, and one guard named Chuck secretly tipped me off that she was planning to file fake criminal charges against me, complete with staged photos and false witness statements, which gave me just enough time to prepare my counter move. Because if she wanted a media circus, I was going to give her one. And on that Friday morning in the cold Montana air, I arrived with surveyor stakes, my grandfather's original deed, and a local reporter named Marcus Webb, who Brenda herself had invited, thinking he would write about me as a violent squatter. But instead, he listened to my evidence, took photos of the unpermitted construction, and even witnessed Sarah Smith herself step forward to publicly confirm the truth, that Brenda never showed homeowners any purchase documents, that the HOA was never legally registered, and that they had all been misled into paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for houses that could legally be condemned. Then Sarah's husband David, an accountant, produced records showing Brenda had collected over $180,000 in HOA dues and assessments in a single year with no budget, no financial statements, and no proof of where the money went. And when the reporter asked Brenda the simplest question of all, if the development was legal, why she had never filed a countersuit against me, she had no answer, only silence, and that silence was louder than any scream. And at that moment, the tide turned, because what started as a land grab had now become exposure of criminal fraud, wire fraud, property fraud, tax evasion, and even unsafe construction practices, since as a licensed electrician I had already proven multiple violations, like reversed wiring near sinks and outlets that could have electrocuted children. And when I showed Sarah and the reporter these hazards, it became clear this was no longer a private feud, but a public scandal, and Brenda's empire began to collapse. Her fake legal threats, her defamation emails to ruin my business, her intimidation of residents, all of it was unraveling in front of her. And suddenly, the families she had ruled over like a dictator began to see her for what she truly was, a con artist, running an illegal HOA racket on stolen land. And while she tried to bark orders about bylaws and confidentiality, everyone realized those bylaws were meaningless, because the HOA itself had never been filed with the state, making it a complete fiction, just like the tax sale that started this nightmare. And as the reporter's camera clicked and more neighbors gathered to watch Brenda sputter and stall, I felt the words of my grandfather echo in my chest, that this dirt was worth more than gold, but only if I was smart enough to hold on to it. And in that moment, standing on the gravel road he had laid with his own hands, while Brenda's house loomed behind her like a cardboard palace, I knew I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for his legacy, for the truth, and for every family who had been deceived into building their dreams on a foundation of lies. And the story was only beginning, because Brenda had no idea that the courts, the county, and the press were all about to descend on Whitefish Meadows and expose every last nail, every dollar, and every secret she thought she had buried. But this was Montana, and out here land is life, and no one steals it without consequences.